What's good, greatness gang? Welcome back to another reaction. And today I have a very special reaction for you all. You're going to be reacting, discussing, listening to, watching a gentleman break down his genius. And I'm talking about the legendary Neil Peart from Rush. All of you who watched my last Rush video, the Tom Sawyer reaction, you guys flooded the comments and was telling me basically to get to know this gentleman. And I came across an interview for him, and I also came across something called Neil Peart's Guide to Neil Peart's Drums. So we're going to see what that's about. And I also listened to you in the comments who all recommended the drum solo from him in Frankfurt. So it's going to be a nice lengthy reaction, and I want to get to know this guy better because all of you said he's arguably the greatest rock drummer of all time. I love drums, so I was very interested to hear his story, so let's get into it. Oh, this clip is called Obsess, an interview with Neil Peart.
Obsessive, hopefully on a less than psychological disturbing way, but I do tend to get very enthusiastic. And actually enthusiastic is a word I much prefer. It literally means infected by the gods. A lot of my obsessions actually grew up around a reaction to touring and the tedium of it. Reading had fascinated me since grade school, really, and I can always remember going to the library on every Tuesday after school and getting a new load of books and all that. But I never really applied any of that into writing at that time because at age 13 I started drum lessons, and that became the all-consuming obsession. All other interests went by the board. Schoolwork went down the drain. There was only drums. And then when I started touring in the 70s with the band, I immediately found it extremely tedious because we would have maybe a 20-minute set, and the rest of the time was basically just sitting around waiting or sitting on airplanes or whatever. So I turned to reading at that time, rediscovered it in my early 20s. So I started reading frantically, but kind of methodically, trying to gather all kinds of fiction, trying to fill in the gaps in my education, and a lot of nonfiction from history, philosophy, geography, natural science. And out of the cloistered kind of travel that a rock tour is, I became interested in adventure travel. And also I started carrying a bicycle on the road with me, and on days off I would go out riding in the countryside. So that got me curious about adventure travel, and that played back into writing. I would guess around 85 I went to China on a bicycle trip, my first adventure travel. And something came together at that time because I decided I'm not taking a camera, I'm going to try to capture this journey in words. So after that China trip I wrote the first of a journal of my experiences on it. I traveled then to East Africa after that and toured around the national parks and the wildlife, and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and wrote that one up. Probably about 6 books that I published privately, just small editions for friends and all that, till 20 years later, in 1996, published my first book, which was about cycling in West Africa, and gathered the experiences mainly of a trip around the country of Cameroon and into war-torn Chad at the time. One nice comment that a few friends have made: I'm really glad you made that trip so I don't have to. But that's where my taste for travel, which I've always loved since childhood, and then adventure travel took it up a notch, and then writing came into it. That's what I wanted to write about. So after The Masked Rider, then I had certain reverses in life that led to the next book, which is about a motorcycle journey around North America, from the Arctic to Central America and Belize. 55,000 miles of motorcycling and reflection that led me into a new kind of life. And then my one kind of a musical autobiography, I call it, traveling music. I was driving.
I just want to stop it right there and say I noticed like the first book he wrote wasn't about music. You would think it would be that, so it's very interesting.
Driving from LA to Big Bend National Park in Texas and listening to music along the way and thinking about what I wanted to write next. And as I drove, I'm thinking, well, this is a story. The music that I'm listening to, why I chose to listen to it, what it represents to me and my past and my life. And I decided to weave that into, it's really a long song form, this book of verses, choruses, and bridges and so on. And then I'd always wanted to capture touring life, and talk about adventure travel, and talk about a deep experience that I really wished I could share with people, and have tried various ways in songs and in prose over the years. And finally I decided to fully document a tour, which was Rush's 30th anniversary tour. Roadshow was a a concert tour by motorcycle, which I thought was or a landscape with drums, which I thought was another interesting play on the common title. But after that, I had the same sort of crisis about what do I want to write about now, having captured so much. And then I thought, well, I'll just take a break and write short pieces. So that I found after about 3 or 4 years, suddenly I had a book's worth of stories. And that became the next volume. This was the special limited edition with the drummer's bass drum crest on the front. And it became a book far and away that included stories that ranged so far from not just motorcycle travels and not just drumming stories, but cross-country skiing up in Quebec and snowshoeing up in Quebec. They're all my adventures, let's face it, musical adventures, touring adventures. They're all something that I wish to share with others. My two-wheeled obsession really began.
I just want to say, the fact that you all told me he was in one of the biggest rock bands of all time, like obviously his time is very limited, but for him to write multiple books and to be doing all the things he was doing while he's writing these books says a lot. And I notice like the people in life who are considered the greatest in their field or just legends in general. And I don't know how old he is, but I know you all say he passed away in 2020, so he doesn't look that old. It seemed like the greats in life do so much in limited time, and I'm just always blown away and inspired by that.
Around the mid-'80s, started using a bicycle to travel around the city. And then we were out on tour in probably '84, a day off in Salt Lake City. I thought, I want to go for a bicycle ride. So I found a bicycle store open on a Sunday and then started riding every day after that, and then started building up into greater distances. And then around the mid-'90s, that transferred into motorcycling, and I started riding, having always wanted to, and said I would ride a motorcycle when I was grown up. And by my mid-40s, I figured I was as grown up as I was going to get. So I started riding, and again, my ambition kept increasing, where I wanted to ride greater distances, farther places. So in the mid-'90s, I started riding in the off-season adventures up to the Arctic and around Mexico that spring, and then around Europe down to Tunisia and North Africa into the Sahara. And then around that time had the idea that, this might work on tour. That if I traveled on my own and had a bus and a trailer, I could carry a motorcycle and ride every day, ride to the shows, ride between the shows. So it became a total escape from the combination of tedium and circus that is rock touring. And also what an entree into the wonderful world of the national parks of North America, the scenery, the small towns, and immediately I gravitated toward the small roads. Again, GPS came along, was a huge addition to my touring repertoire, because suddenly I could trace the tiniest little roads on the map. But every day is that kind of adventure, and when I get a new itinerary, I don't look at where the concerts are, I look at the days off between them, you know, what I can do on that day. It's not one big happy adventure. When I get up on the bus in the morning and roll my bike out of the trailer, there's no place I'd rather ride than home. But the point is I have a job to do that day and a place to show up and work. So that being the reality, how can I best make use of that day? And touring life famously can be very cloistering and very alienating. And a lot of musicians over the years have suffered from that in different ways. When you travel the way I do, that's never a danger. You know, I'm in gas stations every day, I'm in diners, I'm in motels, I'm talking to people at rest areas. Sure, I show up at a rock concert and play in front of 10,000 people or whatever. But in between those times, I'm the guy, you know, riding in the rain or
It's just crazy what he said and the way he's saying it. He's like, yeah, I show up to a rock concert and play in front of 10,000 people, but I'm looking forward to riding my motorcycle after this. It's just good to see when artists are normal people. Like, I know how to like separate that myself, but like a lot of people who are like fanatics, like, don't look at them as regular people. And when you see that they have relatable hobbies and interests as you, it makes you become more invested in them. So, and I just like his energy so far.
Riding in 15 degree heat and stopping at the gas station and looking for a motel, you know, the kind of regular things that regular people do. Drums and cymbals in general, it might be said that the drums are the verbs and subjects of the sentence. Bass drum, snare drum being typical fundamentals for rock patterns. And then what I would call the connective tissue is the hi-hat and the ride cymbal. They have a beautiful contrast to each other, I think, in terms of the expression, the tightness and control. Sometimes in a song, you can have a nicely controlled verse and then, boom, open up to a really nice wide washy effect, syncopated with bells, notes on the bow. Sometimes it can be quite retiring. So again, what you notice are the subjects and verbs, the hard words of the sentence, and then the wash of the ride just connects that together in a textural way that's very nice.
I just want to point out something. I only reacted to one Rush song so far, the Tom Sawyer one. And as I listened to that, the song was doing a lot of stuff. And a lot of y'all was mentioning in the comments that they have very versatile, interesting music. So in order for a band to be able to do that, I'm looking at all the pieces of his drum set he has. It makes sense even more that he has such a large drum set.
I always think of this ride that we started when I visited the Sabian factory in Meductic, New Brunswick. So I think late 2003. The first thing we did sitting in the vault was put up a plain gray pie of metal and then explored different treatments of the lathing and the hammering had on it. So with Mark Love, the metallurgical guru, he would keep going away and coming back with different ones, and we'd try them and discuss them, and eventually arrived at the combination of lathing top and bottom and the hand-hammered bell that gave all of the qualities that I like so much, because I like that washy character with nice definition on the sticking on the bow, but especially across the bell, where I'll often have the shoulder of the stick there for quite a percussive implication. And you can play fills on the bell of a cymbal, really, with a little careful placement of where they lie. The uses that I put it to that we can look at sometimes in different ride patterns, and what I've learned over time, my studies with Peter Erskine, where he was very emphatic about the type of ride that I had to have and the type of approach and sticking and the laser limitations and so on, which in my type of more dynamic rock playing has to grow from that. But it was a wonderful place to start from, the expressive ability of a ride cymbal. Or if I do on riding on double surfaces, where I'll use a pattern that goes between the ride cymbal and the china up here, for example, or between the ride and the X-hat here, or even sometimes I'll have my left hand over here on the hi-hat and be accenting on the upbeats on the bell, for example, the pattern in subdivisions that we'll look at. For me, having developed the instrument, that piece of the drum set that was exactly to my specifications was a big part of developing the whole Paragon line of equal expressions in terms of crash cymbals and effect cymbals.
He has a claustrophobia of drums around him. That was very nice. So next we're gonna get into Neil Peart's guide to Neil Peart's drums. Let's see what this is about.
I've played on rental sets. When I go, once in a while I'll go up to Drum Workshop, is the maker of the drum set, and they live just an hour away from my home in California. So sometimes I'll go up there just to play for a day, and I'll set up any old thing. And I like to play unfamiliar drum sets, actually, and they're tuned in a way I wouldn't tune them, and it makes me play a little differently. So I'm wide open to that, and I could make a record on any old drum set. It's remarkable how it's always going to be me. The cymbals are actually a Canadian company, Sabian, and I went to their factory in the early 2000s and experimented with creating my own voice of cymbals with the alchemists and metal beaters there. And it's quite a medieval craft, the making of cymbals, and infinitely variable in turning on lathes and hammering with, guys hammering with hammers there. So the line of them is called Paragon, It literally means a perfect diamond, but they were designed for me as musical symbols of ride and crash variety, as well as the effects symbols, so-called, of China types and splash symbols and so on. So yeah, that was wonderful working with the actual people who make them and finding out what every change to the instrument did to the sound, and then learning to mold that into something that pleased just me and hopefully lots of other people too. Cymbals, being made of metal, have many different voices, many different presences, and sometimes they're an accompaniment like the ride cymbal or the hi-hat, other times they're punctuation like a crash cymbal, or a short punctuation or a long. That's why you choose different sizes of crash cymbals. The ones to my right are called China type cymbals, and they have, I hear them in Chinese opera traditionally, actually they're used, and quite a trashy sort of sound, no offense, but they can be tuned for a very short decay or a nice long white noise sort of swell. And then certain parts during our show, my drum set revolves 180 degrees, and it's centered around then an electronic setup.
I'm glad he mentioned that part, the drums revolving, because I was wondering the fact that he had drums behind him. I was like, so is he playing like this, or is he turning around? Is he turning around? But the fact that the drums rotate for him would make more sense and be less work for him. So that's pretty cool. I've never seen nothing like that before. I need to see that happen live.
Roland V drums, and these are all triggering mostly analog samples, sometimes of old drum sets that I've had, sometimes of other percussion instruments. In one case, back in the early days in the 1980s of electronic drums, where they had a pretty lame sound, I sampled my voice singing what I wanted. I want this tom-tom to sound like doo, doo, and I want this one to go boom, boom. And I sampled that, and so when I triggered that, I'd be playing doo, 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 of me, a sample of my voice. And you can break down my setup to a basic 4-drum setup. What I started with 3 drums actually: snare drum, tom-tom, bass drum, hi-hat, and maybe add a floor tom over there. That was my next optional extra. But really everything I do can be broken down to that, and I could happily play all day on any kind of music with those 4 drums. The difference of tonalities, we have the upper toms, 1, 2, 3, that have higher voices, and they're arranged down conversationally because they follow the drum fills, follow the toms down typically, although I will make an exception and try hard to reverse them. And a couple of times I've had that opportunity and just loved it as a drummer to be able to go up the toms. But they're a set of voices, and they're tuned to very specific notes and intervals that, in fact, there are 4 of mine I can play the Jeopardy theme on perfectly. To my left, I have an xylophone type keyboard percussion trigger that sometimes is like the chorus of Spirit of Radio. It plays the bells in there. Other times it's a marimba for soloing. Sound effects, I'll put a whole selection of sound effects on there.
I was wondering what that was. When I saw that in the Tom Sawyer reaction, I immediately, that stood out to me the most, because I'm not used to seeing that on a traditional drum set.
And there's another electronic trigger in the middle of my acoustic drums. There are foot triggers for electronic samples that I set off. And even from the electronic kit, I can reach lots of acoustic stuff. So I can get to a real snare drum, a real tom-tom, and real cymbals, because as fun as electronic drums are and as much versatility as they have now, and the surface even is quite nice to play on, but it can never have the dynamics of moving air that real drums and cymbals can have. So it's the combination of them that gives me the dynamism of acoustic drums, and then the rich a virtual orchestra of sounds that the electronic drums can offer. So each of them is a tool as part of the sound palette to be applied to do the job necessary.
Oh, and it was Neil Peart's breakdown of his drum set. I just want to mention what I took away most from that. It's not even like him breaking down his drums. It was his energy and his enthusiasm and his passion speaking about this, like the happiness in his voice and face. Like he was talking like a kid in a candy store. Like you can tell that he really loved doing this. And I love to see artists like that. So, all right, finally, we're going to get to his drum solo from Rush concert live in Frankfurt. Thank you for sticking around this far in the video. Make sure you like it. I say 30th anniversary. Oh yeah. Oh, it's rotating? Okay. Listening to this part right here, like if you close your eyes, you would think it's multiple people playing the drums right now. This is one guy. This is amazing. sounds like he has 4 legs, 4 feet, 4 arms, 4 hands. That's crazy. Is all of this a freestyle, or did he like practice this beforehand? Oh wow. Oh man. The thing about like I've been to a concert before, and at my former job I used to work a concert, so I would see the band give the drummer a short like 2-3 minute solo, sometimes even less than that, and it was nowhere near this. Like, this guy right here can be the whole show. It's unfortunate that he's no longer with us, but it's very fortunate that all of his greatness is online, so drummers that's coming after him can study him and learn from him, be inspired by him. This video was definitely inspiring to me in general. Thank you all for informing me to check him out. Greatness Gang, Near Peart. Thank you for all of your work. Thank you.